Welcome to Hospitality Meets with me, Phil Street, where each week we take a light-hearted look into the stories and individuals that make up the wonderful world of hospitality. Today's guest is David Guile, ex-CEO at McDonald Hotels and now leadership coach extraordinaire. Coming up on today's show, David reveals that not all his promotions were straightforward.
And I literally saw it and just put it straight in the bin. I never ever had any idea that I would end up getting that job.
Phil is somewhat presumptuous, and this is probably the best piece of advice you could ever give anybody. And David demonstrates that there's no wrath like granny wrath.
And the granny got very, very upset and almost sort of whacked me with her handbag as if it was all my fault.
All that and so much more as David talks us through his story and journey to date. There's so much in here around leadership and finding your own style, and this chat felt very much like a session with David. He dropped so many wonderful things in our chat. A huge thank you to him for that. Don't forget, we launch a brand new episode each week telling the amazing and always amusing stories from hospitality. So please remember to like, subscribe and review on whatever platform you're listening. Enjoy. Hello and welcome to the next episode of Hospitality Meets with me, Phil Street. Today, I'm super excited to welcome someone who's played his part in the jigsaw puzzle of how this podcast even came to be. And perhaps he doesn't even know that, but we'll come on to that shortly. He's had basically one hell of a career within hotels, which saw him rise to the chief exec's position at McDonald Hotels. And after 13 years of service with them, he took the decision to take a step back from the operations and focus his energy into what is clearly a great strength, and that's leadership development, and now has his own company as a leadership coach. Amongst all this, he still likes to keep his eye in the hotel world, as well as being a board trustee of two awesome charities, Room to Reward and Daisy's Dream. And as if he wasn't busy enough, he also found time to write an award-winning book, beautifully entitled Potential. So it gives me huge pleasure in welcoming David Guile to the show.
Thank you, Phil. Thank you for that introduction.
No problem at all. How are you doing?
I'm doing very well. How about you?
Yes, good. The sun is out today.
It is.
And I'm not going to talk about the weather. I just can't help myself. But, straight into it. Stop it, Phil. Did I get everything accurate in the?
Yes, you did. Yeah, I thought it was a very good summary, Phil. I couldn't have done better myself. So thank you for that.
Great. Are we done then? Shall we?
Yeah, that's it. That's it. Not much more to say.
Yeah. Brilliant. Where in the world are you today? Where are you recording?
I'm recording this from my office at home. I live in Berkshire, just outside Reading. And it's working from home, which I guess most people are doing at the moment. Although I was in London last week, there's certainly, I think, a buzz back in London, and I think a return to the office. So I think that's good for everyone.
Yeah, absolutely. I was in yesterday actually for Hotel 360, and the centre of London is definitely moving in the right direction.
Absolutely, which has got to be good for the industry.
Yeah, I mean, I think the thing for me was always around when I think it's one thing for the West End to come back because that's very tourism related. But when the city starts getting busy again, then that's kind of the indication that there's a little bit of more normality out there.
Absolutely, yeah. And long may that continue.
Yeah, absolutely. Whatever normality is anymore.
Absolutely. It's the new normal, Phil.
Indeed. Yeah. Well, I think next year when I run this podcast, I'm going to have a swear box, and there's got some key things that if words are ever mentioned, then people have got to dip into their pocket and give to charity, I think. And the new normal will be one of them.
I'll try and avoid any more. I'll try and avoid any more.
Excellent. Yeah. So do you know how you played your part in how this podcast came about?
I'm intrigued, Phil. So please, I know you spoke to me about a year and a half ago about it, and it's taken us this long to catch up. But no, please enlighten me.
Yeah, there's a couple of things. I mean, and I suppose there's some lessons here as well. And this is me turning back into Uncle Phil moment again. But I remember I've known about you for years. I've been working in recruitment now for 17 years, and you as I said at the beginning, you forged out one hell of a career in the world of hotels.
Thank you.
And as a younger recruiter, people like you, for me, were always like, oh yeah, I really want to connect with these people because you're the guys that make the world go round in hospitality. But there's this confidence issue that you have to build to, I think, or certainly I did. When I started my own business, that kind of confidence thing just went. And I just thought, I'm going to start reaching out to people that I want, or certainly I'm intrigued by and want to do business with. And at that point, you'd actually become a leadership coach.
Mm-hmm.
And I was just intrigued about your story as to how that happened. And then I reached out to you on LinkedIn, and you very kindly agreed to have a coffee with me. And we had a lovely session just chewing the fat
Yeah,
that day.
I remember
And
that.
then we've had respective ones. You told me that you'd written a book. You very kindly gifted me a copy of that book. And we'll talk about the book, I'm sure, at some point. And then you said that you're hosting this leadership event, which was at the Conrad, as it was then, in St James's.
Yeah.
And I attended that. Very inspired by that. You and I had further discussions, but it was actually going to that leadership event that really sparked something in me that said, you need to be doing more here in the industry. And that was initially I was going to write a blog, and then I realized under conversation that actually having conversations with people was far more powerful in my view. And therefore that's how the podcast kind of evolved from there.
Wow.
So yeah, it's when I look back on that, it's I find it really, really intriguing how things can weave together just by talking to people.
No, absolutely. I mean, I hadn't realised that, Phil. I mean, I enjoyed our conversations, and I know you attended the leadership event that I put on, and I'm very pleased to have played my part in that. So thank you very much for acknowledging that.
Pleasure, and I always valued our time together. We seemed to put the world to rights and
Yeah,
figure everything out
yeah,
in those
if
times.
yeah, if only it was that easy now. But
I
no, I
know.
agree, and I think that's something that I really enjoy is in terms of catching up with people, meeting new people in the industry and outside the industry, and and just getting together over a coffee with no agenda really, and just
Yep.
learning about things within the industry, getting to know people a bit better, and you never know what things can happen and what it will lead to. And
Yeah.
I think when you say, you look back, you don't know where your career's going. And, you look back and think, gosh, through that conversation or through meeting that person or by applying for that job, the sequence of events has led to, where we are today.
Yeah. It's I find that endlessly fascinating,
Yes.
and I think it's something as an industry that we do very well. Actually, is we're even in moments where we're all busy, we are good at finding time for people,
Yes.
and I value that highly. As you say, you just never know when a conversation leads to either a spark of inspiration or whether
Yeah.
a coming together of mutual agreement that leads to some form of business or whatever. So it's always
Exactly.
worth the coffee
Exactly.
chat.
And when I, think about, my career and some of the things I've done, I can look back and think, gosh, I never thought I would write a book, or I never thought that I would be running a company. But it's just little things that perhaps, have changed the course of your career.
Yeah,
Something by chance or by luck or something that you've initiated. So yeah, it's all to play for.
yeah, absolutely. Well, I mean that's a nice little segue actually, then into your own journey.
Yeah.
So as I said, you had an illustrious career within the world of hotels, but obviously you built to that. You didn't wake up one morning and was a chief executive um,
No.
at the age of 21 or whatever. So yeah, take us all the way back.
Okay.
How did you get into the industry in the first place?
Well, it was by chance. I hadn't
Right.
intended to become a hotelier or work in a hotel. It was actually by chance. I didn't go to university. I went to a polytechnic, which are now universities.
Mm,
Studied business management, so business studies. I just did an HND. Didn't do the hotel management option. I did a tourism option because I wanted to work abroad, and I had
right.
really no idea of what I wanted to do. And I fell into hotels. I got a summer job at the Crest Hotel in Gatwick, which was my first hotel. And 30 years later, had continuous service with that company, although
Mm,
I worked for five different companies under 2P. but I started as a part-time receptionist for the summer, and I didn't leave. I was then
Right.
taken on as a sort of internal trainee manager, which I did for 18 months. And I found that I really enjoyed the industry. I got a buzz from it. And I could see that there was going to be a lot of opportunities if you worked hard. And that excited me. So I went for a summer job as receptionist in the Crest at Gatwick. And 30 years later, I left the industry, having been, the CEO of the McDonald Hotels. And in that time, I worked for Crest, and then we went to Forte, then we went to Granada, then we went to Compass, and then eventually McDonald Hotels bought the Heritage Hotels from Compass. So
Right.
that's my journey. I mean, it's I guess it's a two-part journey in that career. So I had 15 years with Forte Hotels, and then I had 15 years with McDonald Hotels, and I think I've done most jobs at various different levels throughout that 30 years.
Yeah.
So yeah, so it's an interesting ride. I mean, my initial, I had a few career choices. I wanted to be a prison officer. That was my first. I wanted to be a prison governor,
Wow.
which
You might be the first person I've ever spoken to that had that as an aspiration.
oh yeah, no, that really interests me. And when I think about it, there's a lot of similarities between that and running a hotel. You're managing a building. I guess the locks are on the other side of the door. You you don't have to worry too much about where your business is coming from. But it was something that interests me. But I eventually took a different path,
Yeah. Well,
and I'm pleased I
do you
did.
know? Well, I'll bet. Yeah, I'd never thought about it that way until you'd said. So maybe it was just maybe it was just one of those things whereby your brain knew that you wanted to be a hotelier, but actually you just hadn't figured out that yet,
Exactly.
and that was the thing that presented itself first, and you went, "Oh,
Yeah,
yeah, that's what I want to do."
I'll go for that. I'll go for that.
Yeah.
But
But I mean, hey, I mean, it's a phenomenally honourable job
yeah,
to do that. I definitely couldn't do it. So I take my hat off to
yeah,
anybody who
no,
ends up going into
and
that
me
line of
too.
work.
And I'm pleased I didn't. But I suppose in a way I saw it as a challenge, and you need to to be resilient. You can make a difference. It's almost getting a positive message out from a, I don't know, sort of a challenging negative experience. But
Yeah,
no, I was very excited about hotels once I started to work in them. And I think although I've never been that ambitious, and I know that sounds, in terms of a little bit strange after, when about my career, but I've always been quietly ambitious, but never that ambitious. But I saw in the hotel sector that, if you worked hard, you could move up that ladder pretty quickly.
mm,
And I think that when I started in the Crest at Gatwick, all I wanted to do was be a duty manager. I wanted to hold that bunch of keys and be a duty
yeah,
manager and have that responsibility. And then I sort of thought, well, once I become duty manager, it'd be great to be, an assistant manager and move up that ladder. And that excited me, the opportunities that presented themselves.
yeah. So it's actually the keys then. It was the keys that made you want to go into the prison
Yeah,
officer.
exactly. It's keys again. There you go. I hadn't thought about that. It was that bunch of duty manager keys that I was desperate to get my
Yeah,
hands on.
yeah.
And once I got
Oh,
hold of them,
brilliant.
I wasn't going to let them go.
Yeah, absolutely. But the words you used there, quietly ambitious, I
Yeah,
think is great because I think if you're outwardly ambitious, people can sometimes mistaken you for being arrogant.
yeah.
But actually, if you've got your, and this is probably the best piece of advice you could ever give anybody, is just get your head down and crack on, as you've said, then inevitably opportunity comes your way.
Well,
In any case,
yes.
probably before you're even sort of considering it.
And I've always believed that. I mean, there is a fine line between confidence and arrogance, and it is a difficult sort of balance because you need to be confident, but at the same
Yeah,
time, you don't want to be overconfident or being perceived as being arrogant. But I have always sort of just focused on the job that I was given. I tried to keep my head down and almost let my actions and my results, and as I grew within a business and had a team, allowed them to do the talking for you. And I always felt that if you just focused on the task in hand and that you did it to the best of your ability, that other opportunities will present themselves. And I found that to be true, whether that was fortuitous or whether it was meant to be. But I did find that I never ever imagined in a million years that I would be a CEO of a large independent, one of the leading hotel companies in the UK. That
Yeah.
never even would have crossed my mind. I think the most I'd set myself was to be a general manager by the age of 30. I hadn't even thought beyond that.
Right.
um, and when I was in a leadership position, and now as I coach, a bit of sort of coaching I give is just focus on making the most of the opportunity that you have. Do the best you can, deliver the best results through your people, and then opportunities will present themselves. It's great to
Yeah.
have a plan, of course, but don't focus too much on that plan. Focus on the task in hand and doing the best that you can, and then doors will open. And when
Yeah.
those doors open, and I was fortunate that a few doors opened for me, and luck does play a part. But once you get that bit of luck and that door opens, push on that door as hard as you can and make the most of it, and then another
Yeah.
door will open. And that works for me anyway. That worked for me.
But I think it's very good fundamentals to just work towards, because you're really doing there is controlling your own kind of involvement in something.
Yes.
It's you're controlling your reaction to something. If you're given the opportunity to do a job, it's not maybe sometimes it's not necessarily the job that you had ever thought that you would be going into, but
Yeah.
then you can see if you do that, it's going to lead somewhere else. So just get your head down and crack on, and do the best
Exactly.
you can in that job, and you'll soon get the next opportunity. And that is just all about controlling your own reaction to something.
Absolutely. It's being in control of what you can control.
Yeah.
And I think that's a good piece of advice. And I've worked with obviously as I've grown up within the business and taken on more senior roles, I've worked alongside a lot of people, and I've seen a lot of people sort of grow within their careers. And there are so many people now out in the business who are running businesses that I've worked with in the past.
Mm.
And I've always sort of try to coach them and mentor them to really sort of again focus on getting the best out of the people that you work for, and spend more time impressing the people that you work for as opposed to who work for you, as opposed to the people that you work for, because those results your team will be your champion almost.
Yeah.
And that seems to have worked well for a lot of people.
Yeah. Well, I think that's very clear to say, because we spoke before the microphone was turned on about two previous guests,
Yeah.
Paul Spencer and Chris Wayne Wills,
Hmm.
who both tipped their hat to you in our chats. So clearly, you made the right kind of impact on people when you were in that the big positions of leadership.
Yeah, I'd like to think so, and that's what I have always enjoyed. And everyone is different. Every leader has their own style. My style is very different to Paul Spencer's as it is to Chris Wayne Wills. We've all got our own style, but it's about what works for you. How do you get the best out of people in terms of the style that you approach? The principles are always the same. The execution can be different. And I think that's really important. Be true to yourself and what works for you, and what has helped you get results. And as you change companies, I mean, I worked for 5 different companies. The culture in each of those companies was very different. And you
Yeah.
have to adapt to that culture, but at the same time you have to stay true to what works for you. I knew, what worked for me, how to get the best out of people. And, you can adapt and it can evolve and it can develop, but you don't change fundamentally who you are and what you stand for. And
Yeah.
I can remember we went from Granada, which was a very relaxed, informal company who had a real focus on people, and was very progressive, very different to Forte, which was very traditional and quite structured and formal. And then I
Mm.
went to McDonald's, which is again a privately owned company, which had a different culture to Granada. And you have to stay true to yourself in what makes you successful and what gets the best out of people. But at the same time, you have to adapt to the environment that you work in. But I
Yeah.
can remember one of my old bosses saying to me, David, you're too nice. You're never going to make it because you're too nice. And which I took as a backhanded compliment, but I said, I may come across as nice, and I believe I have the sort of emotional intelligence to get the best out of people, but that doesn't
Yeah.
mean that I'm not strong and that I'm not focused and I don't get results. We all do it in our own way.
Here,
And I
here.
think that's so important. And I did a little chapter in the book on, nice guys can finish first,
Yeah.
because I was told that, I wouldn't. So it was nice
Yeah.
to prove that wrong.
I think that's great though that you have been able to prove that, because that's definitely something I like to think of myself as a nice guy, and
Yeah.
I've always done fairly well. I think just coming back to that thing about when when you learn that you can control your own attitude towards things,
Yes.
then it makes a massive difference in terms of how you can progress. But
Yes.
it doesn't, coming back to your point about being true to yourself, I got told exactly the same thing. You'll never be, you're too nice to become a leader
Yeah.
of businesses. And actually, that it's just about you finding your own way.
Yes.
There's no one size fits all to
Mm.
do this. And in fact, at this point in time, I'd suggest that leadership through kindness is exactly what we need
Yeah.
in the industry more than ever before, because of we've got staffing issues in terms of the quantity of people that we're now working from within the talent pool. We've got to look after these people, and that generally comes from being kind,
Yeah.
and then offering the opportunities to develop and so on and so forth. But actually, I completely agree with you, especially on that point around the the nice can have its influence
Mm.
for sure in the workplace, and especially if you're coming back to your earlier point around the fact that you were quietly ambitious.
Mm.
That's probably a trait of somebody who's generally quite a nice person, because you're not wanting to outwardly show the world what your
Yeah.
hand is.
Yeah.
Uh,
And I think you make a good point there. Just into, I think leadership has evolved, and especially in the last sort of couple of years, it is all very much about people centric and well-being, mental health, and development, and giving people opportunities. And I think our employees are more demanding as well of leaders to
mm,
demonstrate the sort of emotional intelligence. And you can still be have all that emotional intelligence and human skills, but still get results, still be tough, but you do it in a professional way, with measured, considered, and with integrity. And
yeah,
I think back again to when you become a leader, you have to make really tough decisions, which are going to upset people. And I must have made hundreds of people redundant. I'm not proud of it. I must have walked a number of general managers for whatever reason.
yeah,
But as long as you do it with professionalism and integrity, and treat people as best you can when you're having to make those difficult decisions, and I think that's so important. That's so
yeah,
important. But I think if you speak to people who have worked for me, they'll know I'm pretty tough. I might do it in a nice way, but they know where you've got to get that sort of relationship where um, you can be tough and demanding, and you want results, but at the same time it's about being supportive, building relationships, and motivating the team to achieve.
Yeah.
I wrote an article on one of my blogs about Gareth Southgate, and there was something in the press again when he was appointed. Is he too nice to be the England manager?
Yeah.
He's a bit weak, a bit soft. But again, he's demonstrated that sort of leadership style can get results.
Yeah. 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 It also carries that I read Carlo Ancelotti's book,
Yeah,
actually, Quiet Leadership,
yeah,
and his point around the fact that he doesn't say a lot
mm,
actually as a leader. He lets the natural talent of people try to flourish, but when he does speak up, it carries extra weight because people are not used to him speaking up. So
yeah.
there's a lot to be said for having that approach. I mean, that comes back to being true to yourself again, though, doesn't it? Ultimately.
It does, and about letting, and I think that's a great point. Letting people flourish. And some advice I was given early on in my career was recruit people who are more specialist than you, are stronger than you,
Hmm.
so that surround yourself with the best people that you can. And just because they may know more than you doesn't mean that you can't lead them and lead the business to success. And it's about how you lead people. And I
Yeah.
think, that's always stayed with me, especially, in my career where, I was 30 years old or 31 years old. I'd only been a general manager for 3 years. And I was sort of plucked by Granada, which was sort of Charles Allen who headed it, to sort of take on a very large regional role. And I looked after like 30 general managers. And I thought to
Right.
myself, I've got very little experience of managing hotels. All these people are far more experienced than me. They're all in heritage hotels, which were more challenging to run because they were more bespoke, individual. It's more of an entrepreneurial approach. I had worked in Post House, which was very sort of regimented and standardized, or very process driven. And I thought,
Mm.
how am I ever going to lead this team and manage these people? And I say the advice I was given was, learn from them. Doesn't just because they're more experienced than you, doesn't mean that they can't learn from you either. And your job is to lead the team. And that's
Yeah.
really stayed with me. And as I've grown in the business and when I was the chief exec in McDonald Hotels, I surrounded myself with very, very strong people, the best I could find. The majority of the ones that I've worked with in the past who have grown up with me, who are far more specialist in those areas than I was. But I was
Mm.
able to pull the team together, set that vision, set the goals, and help them to achieve.
Yeah.
So you don't need to know it all. You don't need to know it all. That's for sure. Because if you
Yeah.
did, there's no way
You,
I would have made it.
well, that and the fact that you can't know it all anyway.
Yeah,
I mean, you're there's only so much we can retain.
yeah,
And as you become the general manager, the clue is in the title, isn't it?
exactly,
You're
exactly.
more of a generalist, and it is about your leadership
Yeah,
capability rather than your
yeah,
knowledge of revenue strategy and sales and marketing and
yeah,
finance and all of these things. Yes, you probably have a good level of understanding, but you've got somebody in your business who has more
yes.
level of understanding.
But although that feel that sort of comes naturally to you and it makes sense, you'd be surprised the amount of people that will recruit specialists and then start to tell them how to do it.
Yeah,
And and that happens a lot, and I've seen it a lot in the people that I've coached or in some of the businesses I've worked in. There's no point in recruiting these strong people and then telling them what to do.
yeah,
So yeah, it's I feel quite strongly about getting the right team around you.
yeah, absolutely. But then it makes your job easier as well, and everyone
Absolutely,
flourishes.
absolutely, yeah,
Yeah, it's actually one of the things I took away from the leadership, the first leadership event that you did, because you did do two that I
yes,
attended at
that's it,
least, was around knowing what your strengths and weaknesses are, and
yeah,
actually focusing more on your strengths than on your weaknesses.
hmm
And up until that point, I'd never thought about it that way. I'd
mm,
always come from the school of lift your weaknesses. Obviously, you continue to work on them,
yes,
but don't let that dominate your day, because you'll lose energy on it. But actually, the things that bring you energy are the things that you're good at. And it's actually such a clever and simple thing that until
Yeah.
that point I had never thought about it that way.
No, absolutely, and it is an interesting point. And again, it's only over a period of time that I've started to really, to realise that build on what you're good at. And it can take a lot of energy to try and correct a weakness, but how much impact and difference is that really going to make? But if you're good at something, focus on that and make yourself even better and stronger, and then
Yeah,
you're almost in a better position to tackle some of the other challenges.
yeah,
So, and I think strength-based coaching is so important. A lot of people will come in with some challenges and things they want to correct, but it's only when you challenge them in terms of what are your strengths, what are you good at, because a lot of people really struggle to identify their strengths,
yeah,
and don't realize that they have some of the strengths that they have. And I think it's certainly a new way of looking about how do you grow. And in coaching, it's not about trying to correct things, it's about making yourself better in the things that you're good at, so that you become even stronger in that area.
yeah. And that's where your natural energy is
Absolutely,
as well.
absolutely.
So yeah,
And we have a tendency, to focus on the things that we're not good at, as opposed to the things that we are good at.
yeah,
And it's about, for me, catching people doing things right than catching people doing things wrong.
yeah,
It's that whole sort of approach and sort of, the way that you think.
yeah. That's another great line actually. Yeah, God, you should write a book. Oh wait,
I should. I hope I'm not having to put a pound in your pot about the
no,
cliche
no,
thing.
none of these are in the swear box list. Don't worry, it's all
I've,
COVID related stuff that'll be
I've,
going in there.
yeah, no, I've got a few more up my sleeve as well, Phil, on that one. The one I always use
Yeah,
in coaching, and you've talked about it before in terms of what you're in control of, and
yeah,
I say to some people, you can't stop the waves, but you can learn how to surf them. And I think for me, that was really,
very good.
that resonates really strongly with me. You don't waste all your energy and stress about things that are outside of your control. You have to accept that that's how they are. And what
Mm,
you need to focus your energy is how you deal with that,
yeah,
of how you deal with that situation. And learn to deal with the situation, because it's not going to change. You have to change how you react to it.
yeah,
And I think that's worked well for me in the companies that I've worked for.
yeah. And never more prevalent than that. Nobody had a manual to hand over to people on how do you close your hotel and reopen it and close it again and
Yeah,
reopen it.
absolutely.
When you've got no forecasting capability at all, and no playbook to understand how we deal with landlords, how we deal with local authority, so on and so forth. You have just got to, as you say, get on the surfboard and ride it,
Yes, yes,
and do the best you can.
exactly. And again, it is a little bit of a cliche, but you learn from your mistakes, you pick yourself up, and you get on with it again.
Yeah,
And it's all about resilience, and I think resilience is such an essential trait of leadership. You have to have personal resilience,
yeah,
and be able to fail and come back stronger, and keep going.
yeah. I think that being able to fail is massively important as well,
Yeah.
because that's inevitable
Yes.
as well. You can't have an upward trajectory of success
No.
for the whole time of your life and career.
No, you're always going to have setbacks, and it's how you deal with those setbacks that actually make you the person and the leader that you become.
Yeah. I feel like I'm having a session here today, as opposed to talking about your journey. But I find it really, really fascinating. It's such an interesting topic,
Oh no, thank you.
and needed. As I said earlier, I just think that leadership can be the savior of everything
Mm,
that's wrong in any sector. It's all about how that leadership deals with things and accepts that there are some things that are not perfect, but how do we get past the non-perfect
yes,
stuff?
yes.
And there's all manner of short-term problems, medium-term and long-term at the moment. So
Mm,
it's I just it's a conversation that I think it needs to be kept front and center because I do genuinely believe that good leadership will help the industry massively.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, I would agree with that. I'd agree with that.
So I have taken you off your
Yeah,
journey a little bit. Granted, you definitely gave us a kind of simple form
yeah,
of it, because you didn't really transition companies. The companies transitioned, as
absolutely.
it were,
Yes.
which is unusual. I don't think I've had that as a whole career
Yeah,
path. And obviously, I say whole career path. You're forging a new career for yourself now.
yeah,
But you did make it to GM before you were 30.
yes,
You were then put into the regional role at the age of 31, 32,
yes, correct. Yes.
which is, I mean, with the best will in the world, that is
Yeah.
remarkable.
Well, yeah, and again, I think it comes back to the fact that I never ever imagined myself doing it, and
Yeah,
the story is that I'd been in Hemel Hempstead Post House, which was the new flagship post house that had only been open sort of 18 months. They knocked it down and rebuilt it, and it was the sort of Forte flagship for Post House, and I was
right.
given the opportunity to run it. I'd been there about 18 months, and it was successful. The product was great, the team was great, and business was strong. And Granada had just sort of taken over, had that hostile takeover bid with Forte, and there was a very different sort of culture coming in via Jerry Robinson and Charles Allen. And
Right.
I was fortunate that I was in one of the flagship properties in Post House, and a vacancy, sort of internal vacancy, came within, was distributed within the business to say they were looking for a regional director for heritage, which was looking after sort of 30 hotels, et cetera, as a regional director does. And I literally saw it and just put it straight in the bin. I never, ever had any idea that I would end up getting that job. I didn't apply for it, but my boss at the time, a gentleman called Martin Gray, who was an exceptional leader, he was quite unique in his leadership style, but he had such a he was great at spotting potential. I know, again, that's a little bit of a cliche, but he saw people who perhaps weren't ready for the role, but he saw that they had something in them, and he was a
Yeah.
risk taker. He was prepared to sort of promote people who perhaps weren't quite ready for the role but could grow into the role. He was very progressive, and I can remember him coming to see me and saying to me, have you applied for this vacancy? And I said, what vacancy? And he said, the vacancy for regional director of heritage. I said, no. Why would I do that? I said, I've only been a GM for 3.5 years. I only know Post House. I'd gone through a difficult sort of personal journey at that time, and was sort of I'd moved house and had a few sort of challenges, and I thought, God,
Mm,
I'm just about coping here. And he said, no, I want you to go for it. And I had to sort of pinch myself. Anyway, to cut a long story short, I went for it, and I was up against some very experienced people. And I think when it was announced that I had got the job, no one was more surprised than me, or more shocked than me. But but a lot of my colleagues just like didn't know quite what was happening. But I thought, well, now I've got to prove that I can do it. Others have
yeah.
seen something in me. I've got to actually see it in myself. And it was a fantastic opportunity that I had to make the most of. And yeah, and it sort of opened the door to the start really of my regional role, and my regional career. And I had
Yeah.
Martin Gray and the late Tracy Robbins, who was sort of my mentor, who very sort of sadly passed away a few years ago. She really, both of them really believed in me, and sort of gave me the confidence to be able to do the job.
Yeah, well,
So
that's massively important, isn't it?
it
That
is.
obviously they back you because you were given the job, but that's one thing. But it's not then leaving you to hang out to dry.
No. And I had a lot of support, but within a year, we had restructured. Sort of Granada went on this sort of massive restructure, and I ended up being regional director, looking after 55 hotels within a year. So, sort of in a
Right.
year and a half, I was suddenly general manager of the Post House in Hemel Hempstead, to being vice president, I can't remember what they called it, or regional director of the west of the country, which was 55 properties because we went clustering. So it was a massive, massive learning curve and a big jump. And I look back and I think, gosh, I'm not quite sure how I managed it or survived, but you
Yeah.
do, and and it was a great lesson for me. And I'm sure some of the managers that reported into me were thinking, my golly gosh, what have we got here? But
Yeah. Yeah.
it proved to be a great opportunity for me, and I met some fantastic people. And some of those people I worked with then, were working with me at McDonald Hotels. You know, which has been great. But a lot of people have come
Yeah.
on that journey with me.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that speaks volumes in itself. Is that people clearly wanted to work for you, and especially that becomes more important the more
Yeah,
leadership
yeah,
positions you need to have in your teams to be able
exactly.
to get doing stuff that it's quite a small industry in the end. There, especially as you climb the ranks, the pool of people, of course, gets smaller and smaller at the
Yes,
same sort of level.
yes.
You want to you build trust in people, don't you? And that's reciprocated, and these relationships can last a lifetime.
No, they can do very much so, very much so. Yeah, and I think that's so important. Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah, it's still it's a remarkable story in itself, in the sense of that from the outside looking in, people would look at it and go, "God, he's far too young for that,"
mm.
and probably looked at that from the inside as well. You probably had GMs who were way older than you, and
What?
way more experienced at
Absolutely.
that level.
Yeah, yeah,
But all you did, I guess, was control your attitude to what was put in front of you. Be
and
thankful that
yeah,
somebody saw something in you that you didn't see in yourself
yeah.
at the time, and just get your head down and crack on again.
Absolutely, and make the most of it. And no, I'd agree, and I think a lot of it again was down to sort of Granada and Charles Allen and the way that he saw the business. I think if it was still with Forte, a lot of the managers who had been with Forte over the years, would have certainly been in line for that position. So again, it was fortunate that I was in a quite high profile property. Granada had just taken over, and they wanted, I think, a new approach, and they
Yeah,
wanted a different culture. And I think that I was sort of in the right place at the right time, and took advantage of it. But something else that comes up in coaching a lot for me, and some very sort of well-known leaders, it's all about that imposter syndrome. You almost have to
yeah,
pinch yourself to say, can I do this job? Obviously people believe that you can, but you suddenly sort of reflect and think, gosh, do I have
yeah,
the right to be here? And I certainly felt that when I took on that role. And I felt that even when I was CEO of McDonald Hotels. You sort of look back, you think, gosh, how did I get here?
yeah.
How did this happen?
I fell asleep one day and woke up, and I was
Yeah,
chief executive of
how did this
a
happen? But
prominent hotel company.
you have to sort of challenge those sort of insecurities and feelings that you can't do it. You have to reframe it. The fact that, well, actually, I am here. There's a reason why I'm here, and let me demonstrate to everyone else and to myself
Mm,
why I have got this position. So
yeah,
it is interesting in that respect, that how careers can take off.
yeah. I had the same relationship with luck earlier in my career. I lots of good things happened to me early in my career, and I put it down to luck.
Yeah,
Just like always felt like, why is this happening to me? I don't feel like I've done anything special.
yeah,
But then I remember one of my early career mentors sitting me down and say, "Stop believing it's luck,
yeah,
because good things are happening to you because you're doing all the right things, and
exactly,
you're just getting on with it." And I
exactly.
didn't think that what I was doing was exceptional in any way, shape, or form.
Yeah,
But you can put your head up above the parapet just by doing the fundamentals correctly and coming into work with a cracking attitude, and
yeah,
and you can make progress before you just think that, why does this keep happening to me?
yes,
I,
yes,
yeah, slightly different in the sense that you were a multi-regional general manager, into your early 30s.
Mm.
That kind of was happening to me early 20s, and I was on one cruise ship, but I was making such quick progress. And
Yeah.
I remember looking back at the age of 23, I was the deputy food and beverage manager for, a 15 food and beverage outlet cruise ship,
Yeah.
and thinking, at the time I was just in the moment, but now I look back on it and I go, what were they thinking,
Mm.
putting me in with that level of responsibility? And with all surrounded by so many people who were way more experienced.
Yes.
And it just comes down to that thing again. You just control your own response to it. And I definitely had imposter syndrome with
Yeah.
that at that time.
I think you'll be surprised at the amount of people that do have that imposter syndrome. And
Yeah,
I see it almost as a positive and as a strength if you use it in the right way. And you talk about luck. I do believe in luck, but I also believe that you create your own luck. You do
yeah,
create the opportunity to have some lucky breaks. And as I say, when you get one, make the most of it.
absolutely. Yeah. So you were into McDonald Hotels then next.
Yes.
You started there as a regional director?
Yeah, I was a regional director for the South. So we came over with the sort of acquisition of Heritage Hotels. So I came over as managing director of the South, or regional director of the South. Had about, I don't know, 20 odd hotels. And then we went through a lot of changes then because McDonald Hotels was sort of integrating another company into their company and the structures. So there was quite a lot
Yeah.
of churn at the time. And because McDonald Hotels wasn't that represented in the South, it was very much a sort of northwest Scottish business. There was only, I think, 3 hotels in the South. So again, it was a great opportunity for me to sort of represent the company down south. Majority of the hotels were the heritage hotels that I knew, and yeah, I think for the next 3 years I sort of ran that region, and then I think I was made I think I was managing director for the south, and then I was made deputy chief executive for a couple of years, and then chief executive for the last 7 years that I was with McDonald Hotels. So, that
Yeah.
was a great journey. And, Donald McDonald again saw, I guess, something in me and gave me a fantastic opportunity. And I think that helped that I'd worked with Donald for a few years. I got to know him, he got to know me. And I guess I was the right fit at the time to lead the business.
Mm.
It was a great opportunity. It was a great challenge, and I think we had enormous success in terms of changing the perception of McDonald Hotels, which is very much, I think, seen as just focusing on profit, with not as much focus on people and on service. But
Mm.
we really flipped that on its head, and we became an aspirational hotel company to work for. We won the AA Hotel of the Year award twice while I was CEO. We had some great results, EBITDA level, and people wanting to come and work for us. And it was a fantastic journey of how we sort of changed, turned the company around,
Yeah.
and had a lot of support, and really sort of learned a lot during that process. But it was tough. It was really tough. And I think,
Yeah.
once I left and looked back, I thought, gosh, resilience does play a big part, just in terms of, leading a business. And we had some difficult times with the recession and the financial crisis and whatever. But I look back and I think, gosh, we did well. We did really well.
Yeah.
I'm really proud of what me and my team achieved there.
Yeah. No, undoubtedly. And then, I suppose, like most things, all good things come to an end.
Yes.
You did, as discussed, 13 years
Well, it was
with
it was
them.
29 years in total, and I round it up to
Yeah,
30
of
because it
course. Yeah.
sounds so much better. But I did
Yeah.
15 years with Forte and 14 years with McDonald's, but 29 and a half years it was. So I round that
Yeah.
up to 30, and
That's fine. I'll give you that one.
yeah, thank you. So I see that almost as two halves. First 15 years, second 15 years, and now I'm on my third sort of chapter,
Mm.
which again I never envisaged that I would be doing. But setting up my own company, doing what I'm passionate about, working with people on a one-to-one basis in terms of maximizing potential and leadership, and really, really enjoy it, and feel, again, when you work for a company, you're not totally in control. Again, you can only control what you can control. But when you
Yeah.
work for yourself, it's very different. And I think,
Yeah.
having that sort of full control over what I choose to do, who I choose to work for, when I choose to work, is a fantastic position to be in. And, I'm very grateful for the opportunity that, I have now. And it's great. And I've done things I never thought I would do. I didn't think I'd set up my own business, and that's a challenge in itself. I've always sort of been part of something much bigger, part of a
Mm.
big business. You represent the company, whereas representing yourself is very different. But I've worked with some fantastic people. I wrote a book which I never thought I would do.
Yeah.
I've done some leadership conferences that I've sort of championed and headlined, which I've been keynote speakers at conferences. So it's just a completely different change for me, and I've really enjoyed it.
Yeah. Yeah. Any more books on the horizon?
No, well, no more books. I was When I did my first book. I mean, that was a great experience. I learned so much from it, and I never thought that the book that anyone would buy the book. Again, it's my imposter syndrome coming out. I just thought,
Yeah.
who will want to read it? But it took off, a life of its own. It was a number one bestseller on Amazon. In the leadership and management categories. I think it was something like 8 weeks at number one.
Right.
It won the CMI Business Book of the Year award in 2018. It's in the British Library. So, I mean, it did, again, I just couldn't believe how well it did. And my publishers wanted me to do a second book. But when I reflected on it, I thought to myself, do I want to do that again? Well, I've almost done it. And I just thought to myself, I'm in control now, and I'm not going to do things just because people are wanting me to do it. And I thought, no, I've done the book. It was a great experience, but I wanted to do different things. But the book has given the opportunity to do the leadership conferences. I've done an online course with it. It's sort of, a lot of companies have used the book as a basis for their conference, and I've gone in and sort of
Brilliant.
done a keynote speech. So it's given me lots of opportunities, but I think I've done the book thing now, I have to say.
Yeah. I mean, which is fair enough, because it's a book that transcends industry.
Yes.
It's not
Yeah.
an industry specific leadership book,
No.
as it
No.
were, all about finding your own potential.
Yeah.
There's a section in there about strengths and weaknesses, of course, as we
Yes.
discussed
Yes.
earlier. And it is. I mean, I'd recommend anybody to read it that's interested in any kind of personal development. So
Thank
it's
you.
it's still out there doing well as well.
Well, it's still out there. It's the sales have after 4 years or even longer, I think, have not as buoyant as they were. But like any book or record or program, it has its day. You push it, you promote it, and then it fine. But it took a life of its own, which I was just amazed about, really. And
Yeah,
it's been a really good experience for me to have written it and to have gone through that process. I have to say, it was a great experience.
yeah. It's like taking what's in your head and making
Yeah,
sense of it all.
yeah. Well, I'm not. Yeah, I mean, the first draft. I think the first draft. I mean, I think this must have been about draft 10 once the editor gets involved with it. But the
Right.
first draft was very different, I think, to what it ended up as. It was almost like a download of everything that I'd learned or experienced or got frustrated about. But as the redrafting and the editing went on, it sort of ended up in what it was. So
Yeah. No, I can only imagine. I can only
yeah, well,
imagine.
I think that would certainly have been a bestseller, the first draft, but
Yeah.
perhaps wasn't quite appropriate for my first book.
Bestseller in your own family.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly.
Um, no, that's great. So what does the future hold?
I think just more of the same, really. Sort of hopefully working with up and coming leaders, emerging leaders in the business. I've got a couple of non-exec roles which I really enjoy. doing. So, just see where things go, and also get that balance, that work-life balance, which is so important nowadays. And I look back in my 30 years and thinking, well, I didn't really have a very good work-life balance. Work seemed to really sort of take over my
Right.
life, really. And
Yeah.
and I think, I'm focusing on sort of, getting a good balance, and being challenged, doing some work, but also having some downtime as well. I'm getting on as well, Phil, so I just need to
Oh, yeah.
take it easy. Oh yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, I'm excited about the future, but I'm also very happy in what I've got, what I've achieved, and not pushing myself anymore.
Yeah. Yeah. You've definitely earned the right to do that for sure. And I think what you're doing now is almost you're giving back as well. You're taking that knowledge that you've built up over your career, and it's there for people to engage with you on it in many
Yeah.
different forms.
No, thank you.
Um,
Yeah, no, I enjoy that. I enjoy that, and I always say, I've not got all the answers. The answers are within us.
yeah,
But you can share experiences and talk things through. And as I say, everyone's different. There's always different ways of doing it. But if you can draw on experience, then I think that helps as well.
absolutely. Um, Before I let you go, there's a question I'd like to ask everyone that comes on the show. Have you got any funny stories from your career that are shareable?
Mm. I think, well, I'm not sure how funny it was at the time or how funny it is now, but I think the one that sticks in my mind is when I was starting off my second hotel. It was at the Crest Hotel in Bexley that then became the Post House. And I was an assistant manager, and I was running a wedding. And there's usually stories connected to weddings. I was running a wedding, and the wedding cake went AWOL, went missing. And what happened was that we had a wedding the day before, and the bride of the previous wedding had taken the new wedding cake back
Oh
by
my
mistake.
God.
So, and I can always remember Granny from South Wales had made the cake that went missing. And I just come on duty and realized that I was going to have to talk to Granny and the bride to tell them that the homemade wedding cake was no longer
Oh, a nightmare.
there. And the Granny got very, very upset and almost sort of whacked me with her handbag as if it was all my fault. And we did get the cake back, but not until about 2 days later.
All right.
So I guess looking back on it is funny. It wasn't funny at the time for Granny or for the bride.
No.
But yeah, I think that sticks in my mind. I think it was the first sort of incident I had to sort of deal with as a young assistant manager.
Yeah. 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 Well, I mean, they're full. The hospitality is full of situations like
Yes,
that, isn't it?
exactly.
That's what teaches
Exactly.
you the resilience and the problem-solving skills.
It does. Yes. Yes.
Wonderful. Okay. Well, if people would like to get a hold of you, David, and chew the fat and learn a little bit more about you and your background, what's the best method for them to do that?
Either message me via LinkedIn, or I have a website, davidguile.com. So it's quite easy to, and my phone number's on there, and I'm always, welcoming, direct phone calls or messages via email.
Fantastic. You might regret that.
Yes.
Wonderful. Well, I massively appreciate your time, and I'm so glad that we got there in the end to do this, and wish you all the very best with the next chapter.
Thank you, and to you. It's been a pleasure. Thanks, Phil.
No worries at all. Take care.
Cheers. Bye-bye.
Cheers. Bye-bye.
And there we have it. A huge thank you to David for his time and for giving us so many golden nuggets of leadership in our chat, also demonstrating that you don't actually have to move companies in order to progress. Thanks so much, David. We'll be back next Wednesday with more stories from hospitality, but until then, thanks for listening, and we'll see you next week.